Hi, everyone. I've been a lurker here for years, but this is the first time I'm posting. Honestly, I'm not sure where to start. My name's Ethan, and up until recently, I thought I had a pretty great life. My wife, Lauren, was my everything. Smart, funny, and the kind of person who lights up every room she walks into. I thought we were solid. I thought I knew her. But something happened last Friday that's shaken me to my core. Lauren and I were out with our friends at this trendy new bar downtown. It was one of those places with overpriced cocktails and a DJ who thinks they're headlining Coachella. Lauren loves the scene, and I've always gone along with it, mostly because seeing her happy made me happy. The night started off like any other, laughs, drinks, and stories around the table. But then, I noticed something. Lauren kept leaning in close to Ryan, one of her coworkers. She'd laugh at his every word, her hand brushing his arm just a little too often. I tried to tell myself I was imagining things, but the way she looked at him, it wasn't in my head. At one point, Ryan leaned in and whispered something to her. She burst out laughing, throwing her head back like he'd just told the funniest joke in the world. Everyone at the table turned to look at me. That's when Madison, one of Lauren's closest friends, muttered, "Wow, that's awkward," under her breath. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My wife, my Lauren, was practically putting on a show for everyone, and I was the punchline. I tried to act like it didn't bother me, but my hands were clenched under the table. Then came the moment that really hit me. Ryan raised his glass, smirking as he toasted, "To Lauren, the life of the party." She laughed, gave him a playful nudge, and said, "Stop it, you're embarrassing me." But there was this glint in her eye, like she was loving every second of it. Everyone laughed, except me. I felt like I was watching a movie where I didn't belong, like I was the extra in their story. Later, when I couldn't take it anymore, I leaned over and quietly asked Lauren if we could leave. She gave me this irritated look and said, "What's your problem? We're having fun." I told her I wasn't feeling great, but she brushed me off, saying, "Ethan, you're being dramatic. Just relax." The humiliation didn't end there. When we finally left the bar, Lauren stayed behind for a minute to say goodbye to everyone, especially Ryan. I stood outside in the cold, feeling like a fool. When she finally joined me, she was all smiles, acting like nothing had happened. I asked her if she realized how uncomfortable she'd made me, and she rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on, Ethan. It was just harmless fun. Don't be so sensitive." The next morning, she called me while I was out running errands. Her tone was cheerful, like she was trying to smooth things over. "Hey, babe," she said. "I just wanted to check in. Are you okay? You know I love you, right?" Her words felt hollow, like she was reading from a script. It wasn't love, it was damage control. I don't know what's going on yet, but something doesn't add up. The way she acted last night, the way she looked at Ryan. It's like she's someone else. I've decided to start paying attention. I'm going to find out the truth, no matter how much it hurts. This is just the beginning. Stay with me, because I've got a feeling things are about to get a lot worse. After that morning call, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Lauren's overly sweet tone, her casual brush-off of my concerns the night before. It all felt calculated, like she was trying to keep me from looking too closely. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. The way she acted at the bar wasn't just thoughtless. It was deliberate. I decided I'd play it cool for now, but I started paying closer attention to her behavior. That same day, Lauren told me she had to work late. "We're wrapping up this big project," she said with a smile, as she slipped her laptop into her bag. "Ryan's been such a lifesaver with everything." I didn't say anything, but hearing his name made my stomach turn. That evening, I made dinner for myself and tried to distract my thoughts with TV, but I couldn't focus. My mind kept going back to the bar, to her laugh, to that look on Ryan's face. Around 10 p.m., Lauren finally came home. She looked different. Her hair was slightly mussed, her lipstick faded like she'd been eating or, well, something else. I casually asked, "How was work?" She paused for half a second before answering, "Busy, but we got a lot done." Then she kissed me on the cheek and headed straight for the shower. That's when I noticed something. Her phone, which she's usually glued to, was still in her purse. Lauren is the type who checks her phone constantly, but tonight, She hadn't touched it once since she walked in the door. While she was in the shower, I hesitated for a moment, then grabbed her bag. I know. It's not something I ever thought I'd do, but I couldn't ignore my gut. Her phone was locked, of course, but the notifications on the screen were enough to make my heart race. A string of texts from Ryan lit up the screen. Tonight was great. Can't wait for next time. You looked amazing. Hope Ethan didn't suspect anything. I nearly dropped the phone. My hands were shaking as I put it back in her bag and sat on the couch, trying to calm down before she came out of the bathroom. When Lauren finally joined me, she was all smiles again, like nothing was wrong. She sat next to me on the couch, pulled a blanket over us, and rested her head on my shoulder. "What are you watching?" she asked, as if the past 24 hours hadn't happened. I forced myself to play along, even though my mind was screaming at me to confront her. But no, I needed more. Jumping to conclusions without solid proof would only give her a chance to spin the story in her favor. The next few days, I watched her like a hawk. Lauren's behavior was almost too perfect, like she was trying to prove how normal everything was. She cooked dinner, suggested we go out for a movie, and even bought me a new pair of sneakers she said I'd been eyeing. It all felt fake. Then, on Wednesday night, she had another late meeting. This time, I decided to follow her. Lauren left the house around 7:30, wearing a dress that was far too nice for the office. I waited 5 minutes before grabbing my keys and heading out. She didn't go to her office building. Instead, she drove to a cozy little restaurant on the other side of town. I parked across the street and watched from my car as she walked in. 10 minutes later, Ryan showed up. The two of them sat at a corner table, leaning in close and laughing like it was the most natural thing in the world. My stomach churned as I watched her reach across the table and touch his hand. They weren't even trying to hide it. I felt like a fool. Instead of barging in, I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. If this was what I thought it was, I needed undeniable proof. Lauren and Ryan stayed for over an hour, completely wrapped up in their little bubble. When they finally left, they walked to his car together. I followed them, keeping a safe distance. They didn't drive far, just to a small motel on the edge of town. My heart felt like it was being crushed in a vice as I watched them walk inside together. I sat in my car for what felt like forever, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to storm in there and demand answers, but the other part of me, the part that was completely shattered, knew I wasn't ready. Not yet. I drove home that night in silence, my mind racing with questions and plans. If Lauren thought she could humiliate me and get away with it, she was wrong. But I wouldn't act out of anger. No, I'd make sure she felt every ounce of the betrayal she was dishing out. For now, though, I'd wait, because I knew this was far from over. The next morning, I woke up to Lauren humming in the kitchen like nothing had happened. She made pancakes, my favorite, and greeted me with a warm smile. "Good morning, sleepyhead," she said, kissing me on the cheek. I felt like I was in some sort of alternate reality. How could she act so normal after what I saw last night? The betrayal, the lies. It was all there, staring me in the face, but here she was, flipping pancakes like the perfect wife. I played along, forcing a smile and sitting down at the table. "Late night at work?" I asked casually, watching her every move. She froze for just a split second before answering, "Yeah, we had to wrap up some reports. You know how it is." I nodded, biting into a pancake as my stomach churned. Every word she spoke felt like another knife to the chest. But I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I needed to make sure I had everything lined up before I made my move. Over the next few days, I pieced together more of the puzzle. I went through her phone when she left it unattended, checked her emails, and even found a receipt in her purse for the restaurant she and Ryan had been to. The evidence was piling up, but I still hadn't confronted her. Then came Friday night. Lauren told me she was heading out for drinks with the girls. I knew it was a lie, so I decided to follow her again. This time, I brought a friend, my coworker, Nick. He's the kind of guy who's always down to help, no questions asked. "You sure about this, man?" he asked as we sat in his car, parked a block away from our house. "I need someone to keep me grounded," I said. "If I go alone, I might do something stupid." Nick nodded and started the engine. "All right, let's do this." We followed Lauren's car as she made her way across town. Sure enough, she ended up at the same motel as before. Ryan was already there, waiting for her. This time, I didn't just sit in the car. I grabbed my phone and walked up to the motel office. Nick stayed behind, ready to bail me out if things went south. Inside, I told the manager I needed to find a friend who was staying there. A quick $50 bribe got me the room number. I stood outside the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear muffled voices and laughter from inside. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and started recording. I wasn't going to kick the door down. I wasn't that guy. But I needed proof. As I stood there, I heard Lauren's voice, clear as day. "I just don't know how much longer I can keep this up," she said, laughing softly. "Ethan's so clueless, it's almost funny." Ryan responded, his tone smug. "Don't worry, babe. He's not going to figure it out. And if he does, what's he gonna do about it?" Her laughter cut through me like a blade. "Exactly. He's too soft. Ethan wouldn't dare." I had heard enough. I turned and walked away, my mind racing. They didn't even respect me enough to cover their tracks. Lauren thought I was weak, thought I wouldn't stand up for myself. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed at Nick's place, going over everything in my head. The videos, the texts, the receipts. I had all the proof I needed. By the time I walked through the door the next morning, I had a plan. Lauren greeted me with a kiss, acting like nothing was wrong. "Hey, where were you last night? I missed you." I smiled, hiding the storm brewing inside me. Just had some things to take care of. The next step of my plan was already in motion. I had sent copies of the texts, photos, and videos to Madison. She'd always been a straight shooter, and I knew she'd get the word out. Lauren had no idea what was coming. That evening, Lauren suggested we go out for dinner. Her attempt to keep up the charade. I agreed, letting her think she was still in control. As we sat across from each other at the restaurant, I couldn't help but notice how at ease she seemed. She was laughing, smiling, acting like the perfect wife. But all I could see was the betrayal lurking beneath her polished facade. When the waiter brought the check, Lauren reached for her phone. That's when it happened. Her face paled as she saw the notifications. Dozens of messages from our friends, all asking the same thing. "Is this true?" She looked at me, her eyes wide with panic. "Ethan, what's going on?" I leaned back in my chair, a calm smile on my face. "Why don't you tell me, Lauren? Or better yet, why don't you tell Ryan?" Her jaw dropped, and for the first time, she was speechless. It was only the beginning. She thought I was soft. She thought I wouldn't fight back. But she was wrong. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me. Not anymore. The truth was out, and it was time for her to face the consequences. When Lauren's phone lit up with one notification after another, her face immediately paled. She stared at the screen, her lips parting slightly as if to speak, but no words came out. I could see the panic setting in as her fingers hovered above the screen. "Ethan," she began, her voice trembling. "What's going on? Why are people texting me?" I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms, keeping my expression calm but firm. "You tell me, Lauren. Or better yet, tell Ryan." Her eyes widened, her composure cracking as she realized I wasn't bluffing. "Ethan, this isn't what you think." I cut her off, my tone sharp. "Don't even try it. I know, Lauren. I know everything. The motel, the lies, the humiliation you put me through in front of our friends. It's over." She shook her head quickly, her voice rising. "No, Ethan, please. It's not like that. Let me explain." I stood up, grabbing my wallet and throwing some cash on the table to cover the bill. "You've had plenty of time to explain, Lauren, but you didn't. You thought I wouldn't figure it out. You thought I'd just keep sitting there, clueless, while you played your little games. Well, I'm done playing." Her tears started falling as she reached out to grab my arm. "Ethan, please don't do this. I love you." I stepped back, cutting her off again. "Save it for someone who cares." Without another word, I walked out of the restaurant, leaving her sitting there, broken and exposed. For the first time in days, I felt a small sense of relief. But I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. As I walked out of the restaurant, my hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, not from sadness, but from the adrenaline pumping through my veins. The air outside felt colder than usual, biting at my skin as I unlocked my car and slid into the driver's seat. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel tightly, trying to process what had just happened. Lauren's voice, her pleas, her excuses, they echoed in my mind, but they didn't move me. Not anymore. She had crossed a line, and no amount of tears or apologies could erase what she'd done. I started the car and began driving, but I wasn't heading home. The thought of sitting in that house, surrounded by memories of our life together, made my stomach churn. Instead, I drove aimlessly through the city, the streets a blur of headlights and shadows. Every turn I made, every stoplight I hit, my mind replayed the last few weeks. Her laughter with Ryan at the bar, the text I'd seen, the motel, the lies. It all felt so surreal, like I was living someone else's nightmare. After an hour of driving, I found myself parked in front of Nick's apartment. He was the only person I trusted enough to talk to about this. I called him, and within minutes, he was at the door, a look of concern on his face. "Ethan, man, you look like hell," he said, stepping aside to let me in. I sighed, collapsing onto his couch. "You have no idea." Nick handed me a beer and sat across from me, waiting patiently for me to start. I told him everything, the texts, the video, the confrontation at the restaurant. By the time I finished, his jaw was clenched and his eyes were filled with anger. "She's got some nerve," he said, shaking his head. "After everything you've done for her." I nodded, staring at the beer in my hands. "I don't know what to do next, Nick. I feel like a part of me wants to forgive her, but the other part just wants to burn it all down." Nick leaned forward, his tone serious. "Don't make any rash decisions, Ethan. You've got the upper hand here. Use it wisely." I stayed at Nick's place that night, my mind racing with thoughts of what I needed to do next. One thing was certain. I wasn't going to let Lauren manipulate me anymore. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing. It was Lauren. I let it go to voicemail. Then it buzzed again, and again. Finally, I checked my messages. "Ethan, please. Can we talk? I'll do anything to make this right. Ethan, I love you. I swear, this isn't what you think. Why are you ignoring me? You're blowing this way out of proportion." I deleted each message without responding. Her words were empty, and I wasn't going to let her sweet-talk her way out of this. Instead, I spent the day putting my plan into motion. I met with a lawyer to discuss the divorce. He was straightforward and professional, guiding me through the process and ensuring I had everything I needed to protect myself. I also reached out to Madison. If anyone could help me get the truth out, it was her. Madison was furious when I told her the full story. "I knew something was off with Lauren lately," she said. "But this is disgusting." "Just make sure people know the truth," I said. "She doesn't get to play the victim in this." Madison nodded. "Don't worry. I'll take care of it." By the end of the day, I felt a strange sense of calm. I knew Lauren would try to fight back, to spin the story in her favor, but I was ready. She thought she could control the narrative, but she underestimated me. It didn't take long for Lauren to find out what I'd been up to. That evening, she showed up at Nick's apartment, her face streaked with tears and her voice hoarse from crying. "Ethan, please," she begged as Nick opened the door. "I need to talk to you." I stepped outside, keeping my distance. "What do you want, Lauren?" Her eyes were red and puffy, her makeup smeared. "I want to fix this. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but I love you, Ethan. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." I crossed my arms, my expression cold. "You want to fix this? Tell me, Lauren. How do you fix betrayal? How do you fix humiliating your husband in front of his friends? How do you fix sneaking off to motels with another man?" She flinched at my words, her hands trembling. "It wasn't like that. I wasn't thinking clearly. Ryan, he doesn't mean anything to me. I was stupid, Ethan. Please, just give me a chance to prove it to you." I laughed bitterly. "A chance? You had a chance, Lauren. You had years of chances, and you chose to throw it all away for him." She reached out, her voice breaking. "I'm begging you, Ethan. Please don't end this. We can go to therapy. We can fix it." I stepped back, shaking my head. "No, Lauren. You broke this. And now, you have to live with the consequences. Her sobs echoed down the hallway as I turned and walked back into Nick's apartment. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Lauren's cries haunted me as I closed the door behind me, but I didn't let them sway me. Her pleas, her tears, it was all part of the act. She was trying to salvage her image, not our marriage, and I wasn't going to fall for it. Nick watched me as I slumped onto the couch. That was rough, he said, handing me a drink. I nodded, rubbing my temples. She's desperate, Nick, but it's too late for that. Good, he said firmly. You've been too good to her for too long. Don't let her guilt trip you now. Over the next few days, Lauren's attempts to contact me grew more frantic. She called, texted, even showed up at my work once. I refused to engage. Every time I saw her number pop up on my phone, I reminded myself of what I had heard outside that motel door, the way she laughed about me with Ryan. Then, the shift happened. Madison came through. She'd quietly spread the truth among our mutual friends, and it didn't take long for Lauren's perfect image to start crumbling. I started getting calls and messages from people in our social circle, offering their support. I had no idea, one of them said. Lauren seemed so devoted to you. What she did is disgusting. But Lauren wasn't going down without a fight. She started crafting her version of the story, painting me as cold and unloving, saying I'd pushed her away. It would have hurt if it weren't so predictable. A week later, Lauren showed up again, this time at my lawyer's office. I'd been there to finalize the initial paperwork for the divorce, and she must have followed me. She burst into the waiting room, her face flushed with anger and desperation. "Ethan," she shouted, ignoring the receptionist's attempts to stop her. "You can't do this. You can't just throw us away like this." I stood up slowly, my voice calm but firm. "Lauren, we're already thrown away. You made that decision the moment you chose him." Her eyes brimmed with tears as she stepped closer. "Ethan, I was lost. I wasn't thinking straight. But I can change. I'll cut him off. I'll do anything. Please, don't give up on me." For a moment, I just looked at her, taking in the person I once thought I knew. But she wasn't that person anymore. Or maybe she never was. "Lauren," I said quietly, "this isn't just about Ryan. It's about the lies, the disrespect, the way you've treated me like I don't matter. I deserve better than this." Her tears turned to anger. "You're throwing away 6 years, Ethan. For what? Because I made one mistake?" "One mistake?" I said, my voice rising. "You've been sneaking around for months. You humiliated me in front of our friends. And now you want to act like you're the victim? No, Lauren. We're done." She stood there for a moment, breathing heavily, before turning on her heel and storming out. I watched her go, feeling a strange sense of closure. The divorce process wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Lauren fought hard at first, trying to hold on to everything she could. But the evidence I had was undeniable, and in the end, she had no choice but to accept the terms. Ryan disappeared shortly after everything blew up, leaving Lauren to face the fallout on her own. She tried reaching out to some of our mutual friends, but most of them had already seen through her facade. As for me, I focused on rebuilding my life. I moved out of the house we'd shared and found a small apartment downtown. It wasn't much, but it was mine, a fresh start. I started going out more, reconnecting with old friends and exploring hobbies I'd neglected during my marriage. Slowly but surely, I began to feel like myself again. One evening, Madison called me to check in. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "Better," I said honestly. "It's still hard sometimes, but I'm getting there." "Good," she said. "You deserve to be happy, Ethan. Don't forget that." Her words stuck with me. For so long, I'd defined my happiness through Lauren, through our marriage. But now, I was learning to find it on my own. In the end, Lauren's betrayal didn't destroy me. It hurt, yes, but it also showed me how strong I could be. I didn't need her. I never did. And as I looked out over the city from my new apartment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. For the first time in months, the future didn't feel so uncertain. It felt like a blank slate, one I was ready to fill with new beginnings.